First item on the agenda is the call order and introductions. So if you go around and introduce, and then Mel will lead you. So we'll start with Sierra. Starting here.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Sierra LaFleur with the Hillsborough County Aviation Authority.
John Scott.
Hi, this is President Park staff.
Patrick Macy, Hillsborough County Children's Services.
Elizabeth Watkins, EPS.
Mike Williams, Hillsborough County Development Services.
Jake Hollis, Planning Commission staff.
Melissa Leinhardt, Planning Commission staff. Laura Hart, Paper Bag.
Ben Chad, Whitefoot, Public Works Operators.
Hi, Livette Christie, Hillsborough County Community and Infrastructure Planning Department.
And Chair Online, the only member is Michelle Jenkins, who is the alternate for Jeff Sims, and you do have a form.
Thank you. Okay,
Morning.
first time. Oh, okay, hello. First item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody here for public comment? Seeing none, we move on. Approval of the minutes from the November meeting. If everybody reviewed the minutes, the updates or changes, everything good? Right, we have a motion. John Scott, motion to approve minutes.
Jesus, second.
All right, motion by Jonathan, second by Jesus. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Next up is the Bright Line Stationary Study. And Sarah Jaker is here to at least kick up.
Good afternoon, Sarah Caper, TPO staff, and I have Stephanie with me, who's working with us on this project. Okay, this afternoon we'll begin with an overview of what we were looking to do with our Bright Line Station Area study and the goals. We'll talk about what we heard from the public survey, the analysis we did in user profiles, and then the needs and connectivity plan that we developed as part of this effort. The goals of our study were to identify potential Brightline users. So Brightline is the high-speed rail that currently goes from South Florida to Orlando, and there have been discussions about extending it to Tampa. As part of our study, we are not saying what Brightline should do. They're a private company, but instead, because they have expressed this interest in coming to Tampa and have talked about where a station area might be, what we wanted to do is look at if there was this high-speed rail service coming to Tampa, who might use it? What are the multimodal connections that would be needed to a potential station? What kind of infrastructure improvements might be needed? And how do we set up an early action plan for funding and moving forward with this? What we don't want to happen is have something come here and us not be ready. And a lot of these improvements would be good ones to look at regardless of if a station happens in the area that we think it would or not. So here's a look at our potential station area. Here's a look at our potential station area that we started with. So you can see here a black line that starts on Mutual Parkway. This is our area where we think it could be, but we didn't pick exactly where it was going to be. And instead, you could see some buffers here extending out to downtown Tampa and beyond areas of interest. And you'll hear a little bit later on from Stephanie about our plan and some of the needs that we see, which also extend beyond this area. But we had to start somewhere. We thought this is where we heard most likely it would be a place of interest, and we thought that would be a good place for us to start. We know this is an area that has seen a lot of change and is continuing to see a lot of growth and development. We kicked off our study in February of this year. We did a context assessment, a peer facilities review. We did public outreach. You'll hear more about all of those different pieces. And then developed our conceptual connectivity plan. We went to the Livable Roadways Committee and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee in November. We're going before you today, the Citizens Advisory Committee on Wednesday, and the TPO Board next week. And I want to thank all of the stakeholders and study team members. Several of you are here today, or your organizations participated. We had a broad range of participants who helped guide this study. We talked to several departments, for example, the city of Tampa, from the mobility department to the land use team to the CRA. We met with HART, FDOT, the you can see all these different names here. We had conversations with the airport, even though they weren't officially part of the study team, and with Brightline as well. So all of those different stakeholders help to inform what we're presenting before you today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to provide some more details on the study.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, Stephanie with HDR. Kicking off our study was kind of interesting. We did a context assessment, which at 6 months, 7 months later is probably out of date, given the amount of development that's going on in the Ybor City downtown corridor that we were looking at. But we did evaluate land use, the proximity to destinations, demographics, what's going on in terms of transportation improvements, streetcar, DOT improvements on the interstate. So we looked at kind of what the context of this station site is. It's historic with all the historic districts in Ybor City. So what's on the ground now and what are the redevelopment plans that are coming with gas works? There's the Ybor Harbor development that's being proposed. There's a lot going on in this area. So our initial starting point was trying to evaluate what those conditions are right now. The other thing we looked at really early on were some other peer facilities, the Brightline stations in Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, and then Miami Central, the downtown Miami station, to look at what features, amenities do they have, how many parking spaces do they provide, is there different multimodal connections, what kind of signage, wayfinding do they have, to kind of understand what these other stations have and what the Tampa station would need to accommodate. That's at the station site itself. Bigger picture, we were trying to understand how people would get to the station from the rest of the region, the rest of Tampa Bay, downtown. How are people going to move around? One of the things that we looked at was this public survey and try to understand, do people want to take the bus there? Do they want to drive and park? How do they want to get there? Where are they coming from? And we got a great response. We got almost 12,000 people respond to the survey. And we reached out here in Tampa Bay, as well as to our MPO, TPO partners around the state. So we got answers from people who are wanting to use the station if they're from Tampa and leaving to go elsewhere, as well as people from around the state that would come to Tampa. How would they experience the site once they get here, once they're trying to get to their final destination? Some of the questions that we asked were really geared at how would you get to the station from your origin. So these are people who are leaving from Tampa. A lot of people said they want to use a personal vehicle, drive, park, make that park and ride experience really seamless. But we did see this was an open-ended question, so people were able to answer more than one mode. So nearly 50% said that they would consider more than one mode. They would consider taking an Uber. They would consider taking public transit. They would consider getting dropped off by someone that they know who are driving themselves. So that was kind of encouraging. Not everybody is like, nope, I'm only driving to get to the station. Another way that we looked at it was people who are coming here obviously won't have cars. So what are they expecting in terms of those connections? 70% said that they would be picked up or use multimodal. So we had a lot higher numbers of people who are coming here saying that they would use the streetcar. They would take, a bike share or some other kind of micromobility, biking, walking, or get picked up. I was actually surprised 37% of people said that they would walk once they got to a station. So that was a little shocking to me, but encouraging. We had a bunch of other questions on like, what's your trip purpose? Why would you use it? But we did have an open-ended portion of it. And the interesting thing I thought was people said over and over, now, bring it now, we want it. They really emphasized the need for the station, the desire for it. A lot of people were indicating, concerns were more on affordability, accessibility, but they were things that weren't like, no, absolutely not, never. It was like, these are the concerns that we have, and they all seemed very reasonable. But that enthusiasm was very clear. We did kind of identify some of the key themes and sentiments that I've had here. People are concerned about connecting to other modes, connecting to key destinations, the economic growth, the tourism aspect, the frustration with I-4, they want an alternative to that. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. But yeah, some of the comments here are please, like, get it done now, fast. And surprisingly, when we kind of totaled up all the responses that we got, only 1 or 2% of people were really like, just no. So the majority of people were really encouraged. And I think that's when we talked to Brightline, what they wanted to see. They wanted to see that kind of enthusiasm and need within the community to support this effort. It really was also helpful to understand how people would use the station and how would they get there, how would they leave from the station. And we used that as part of our like technical analysis that we did to understand how many people live within different zones that we set up. So the first zone is within a quarter mile, I think. Yeah, quarter mile. And that's people that would probably walk, bike, take micromobility, could take an Uber if they're, you know, dragging a big suitcase or something. And then we looked at further out zones and thinking like, if you're coming from a mile, you may not walk, but you may bike still. And then overall within the region, we looked at a 45-minute drive shed, and that's roughly 2.3 million people are within that 45-minute drive shed. That is assuming no traffic on like a quick tip. So just want to throw that out there as a disclaimer. But that's roughly what you would see for a catchment area of a inner city type service. So these people would drive from within 45 minutes, get to a station and, you know, travel down to Miami or Orlando or wherever else they would go in their trip. We use those information from the analysis of how many people live within those zones, how many people are traveling currently in a car, most likely, to the other Brightline stations, including existing stations, as well as the planned stations over on the East Coast. And there's 2 other planned or potential stations around the Disney Drive area. And then we also considered Lakeland. That could also be another potential station in the future. So we estimate how many trips are going on right now, where are people wanting to go, and the results really showed a high likelihood from survey results and from the number of current trips that are going on right now, a high relationship between Tampa and Orlando. That was kind of the biggest pair that we saw. We also did see Tampa to Miami. There was a high interest from the survey respondents to go all the way down to Miami. So that kind of overall, we estimate that within the catchment areas of all of the Brightline stations, there's roughly 28 million annual trips going on between these stations. So there is definitely a market for Brightline high-speed rail between these different modes. If you just took a portion of them, you would be able to see that the service is needed. The other thing we did was kind of put a face to the users. So we came up with a series of profiles. These are just 2 of them that kind of show who are the people, how would they get there, what are their challenges, concerns, considerations. So one is, you know, a young professional who lives within the Channel District area, would love to go to Orlando for work. How is he going to get there? What are his considerations and concerns? He wants, you know, safe walking, you know, streetcar to connect easily. And then you've got, you know, maybe an older couple from Lakeland that want to come to Tampa on Brightline, get off, and then transfer to the cruise port. There's definitely a correlation between the inner city travel for passengers going to the airports, going to the ports, going to key destinations within downtown, special events. We think that that's kind of going to be a driver of this, and we want to make sure that those connections would be in place. The kind of outcome of this is we developed a connectivity needs and connectivity plan that show by mode some of the things that we would see at this point as needing to advance. So this included existing projects that have already kind of been kicking off, and they're in some kind of development process, either in design, construction, or have just been a good idea and maybe they need to, you know, advance in the planning process. We identified that, like I said, by mode. So there's a walking, pedestrian mode, there's bicycle mode, and transit, and then vehicle, personal vehicle. And then we have other recommendations like wayfinding technology and that kind of things. that could add on and help that connectivity and access be improved. We looked at them, these needs by the station site itself. So that's the station building. It's the footprint of where people would come to the station. Maybe there'd be some bus transfer. If there's room in the station site, there could be drop off, curbside drop off for Ubers, personal vehicles, the parking garage, all of that within the station site itself. We kind of developed a list, a wish list, if you want to. These are the things that we think should be considered at the station site itself. Then we looked at a larger area that's roughly about a quarter mile. What are the connections that would be needed between a station and the other mobility modes? And it's really difficult to do this when you don't know where the station is going to be. Some of these are not really mappable at this moment, but there are more ideas like if you're going to put a station here and the streetcar station is over here, build a really clear path between the two of them if they're not co-located, which would be unlikely. And then what are the recommendations within that greater area? Roughly, 1 mile around the station or less, but they could be, a connection between the Tampa Airport and Marion Transit Center and the Brightline Station. There could be a connection between the Brightline Station and downtown St. Pete. So those are kind of that greater area. Again, some of the ideas that we had for roadway parking, opportunities to reconnect the street grid around the station, make walking and access to the site easier instead of dead end roads. Again, this would all be dependent upon where the station it goes, but I think these recommendations would all be valuable without a station. They would improve connectivity for the neighborhood and visitors and all the new development that's going in on there without the station going in necessarily. So extending the street grid, a lot of that will come with the gasworks development. That's going to really stitch the neighborhood back together, provide some access across Lucio Parkway, which is kind of a barrier along with the Amtrak and the other CSX rail that goes through there. Speed management, curbside management, that's another big consideration, is making sure that there's adequate drop-off spots. And making sure the safety is there, making sure people who are coming off the interstate, going really fast, slow down and are going through this neighborhood in a safe manner. On the transit side, there are existing transit lines through there. There's the streetcar within this. So really making the connections, and as the station site gets developed and planning goes along, continue those conversations with HART and Brightline to see if there could be some relocation of the existing bus lines. How can that connection between the streetcar and the Brightline station be as tightly linked as possible? And then also the Marion Transit Center, we heard a lot, connecting to the airport was really important. And I think it's important, it doesn't necessarily have to be by rail. It could be by a different mode. We have a bus line that goes from Marion Transit Center to the airport. There's a bus that goes from Marion Transit Center to St. Pete. So maybe the opportunity is just to connect what's already there to a Brightline station and an expressway, or just, we don't have to solve the problem with rail every time. We can start with something and get there, maybe someday. Moving on to bicycle and shared paths, there's a lot going on there with the Green Spine Network. So connecting to that north-south spine that runs along Uchiho with some improvements. There's already bicycle facilities out there, but it could be a bike lane, and maybe in the future having a Palm Avenue cycle track. Maybe that's a better option to connect people to the station area, to the station itself if it is on that northern side. We heard a lot that Nebraska Avenue was kind of a barrier where the Amtrak and CSX tracks are. I think there's some plans to rework that section of Amtrak, that section of Nebraska in front of the Amtrak Union Station. Because the crossing itself is a little complicated and narrow through there. So just kind of improving the whole network, the bicycle network through that area. And finally, pedestrian. We heard a lot in the survey. People wanted safety. They wanted to feel safe. So lighting, clear paths of travel to and from the station so that they would feel encouraged to walk. And there's definitely some opportunities to do that, and the city's already kind of working through some of the projects now. And there's more projects, I think, like the downtown interchange, there's a new shared path that's coming along. So there's a lot of opportunities to keep stitching that pedestrian network together, and then add in the lighting and the other features of a full, safe environment for pedestrians. And then finally, we also heard technology and wayfinding. So knowing when you're at the station, when you arrive, there's a big sign that says "Hart, bus route, whatever. It's departing in 10 minutes." Having that seamless transition will help users both coming and going from the station make those multimodal connections. They know where the parking garage is. They know where, the streetcar access is. And providing them with up-to-date current information will make that transfer more pleasant and have that user experience be better than just like, "Oh, sorry, welcome to Tampa. Good luck. Find your destination as you will." And I'll turn it back over to Sarah, but thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. So, the QR code takes you to the website, which has all of the full user profiles, all the different tech memos, the complete needs plan. Since we weren't able to cover all of that today, but Stephanie covered, I think, really well the highlight. So all that was the link was in your packet, and the QR code takes you to that full set of documents. And our ask of you this afternoon is to recommend that the TPO board accept the Brightline Station Area Study. And we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, Sue's asked her.
I feel
You made this better.
you made my year.
Yeah.
We're wrapping it up. No, great presentation. Thank you both. I really liked how it came together at the end. We've been through the study since the beginning with our stakeholder, and I really like how you brought everything together, and these recommendations at the end are agnostic of location, but still relevant regardless of where it goes. And very real and applicable, where people want to go, where if they're going to take the bus, where to take it, wayfinding, and all the. I think it's an important conversation to have when we know where it goes, how we're going to do the Brightline MTC airport connection. But I think, when the time comes, we'll have that conversation. I do not think it needs to be a flying train, so I agree with you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So yeah, thank you. Great job. Thank you.
Okay.
So, two questions. I think one for Sarah. So this is an action item to the TPO board. Are there recommendations or something you would expect the TPO board then to say, hey, some next steps would be this for this study? And then perhaps for Stephanie, was there any consideration of Forward Pinellas and what happens next with the train if it shows up in Tampa? Because I'm sure Forward Pinellas would love a north approach that splits off to go downtown, and then you continue over to Oldsmar to go down into Pinellas, because from my understanding, they are not interested in building bridges across bays. So what happens next?
So on the first question, the study has the plan and the needs that were developed, and they were developed for at the station site, which I think could be handed over to PAR, City of Tampa, or whoever wants it. If they have conversations with Brightline, if Brightline's going to come do site plan work or something like that, that they could use when they're thinking about having those conversations. Then we have the needs and the plan for the quarter mile, within a quarter mile, and then the greater than. I think it will be a lot more concrete once we know if Brightline has decided on the station area and they announce that, then we can start to work with our partners to make some of the improvements happen. Otherwise, I think we do have a set of needs and potential improvements that could be made if there's an interest by any of the partners, like if VIA's doing some work, or if the port is interested, or the airport, or the city of Tampa, or Hart. I think those needs could easily be developed into projects that could go through either further planning through the Unified Plan Work Program, or through our priority list, or whatever kind of capital improvement programming process. I think there's enough there to begin to program projects if there's an interest with any of the partners.
And we didn't have necessarily specific conversations before Pinellas or really any stakeholders over in Pinellas County or the other, Polk County or Pasco or Manistee, Sarasota. But I think that's something that we've heard along the way is, if Tampa is it, if that's the one Tampa Bay station, there will be these kind of regional connections that are needed. Even, I could see people from Manatee County wanting some kind of regional access directly to Brightline. So that could definitely be a next step is, that's up to Brightline to decide where they want to go with their station. And we were kind of looking at this as, okay, this is one site that they identified, downtown Tampa, this location. What can we do? Again, even if it doesn't come, these are all very valid recommendations that we're making. Improve bicycle pedestrian access and improve the transit access, improve the access to Tampa sites themselves. But the larger conversation in the next step would be these regional connections.
Fort Pinellas did share the survey. They were
Oh,
one
yes,
of the
yeah.
peer MPOs that shared the survey with their network. So I think, put it on social media and did other things. So we did get survey responses with people living in Pinellas County, as well as some of our neighbors in the greater Tampa Bay area, as well as across the state. And one of the things that we are working on, not for this project specifically, but one of our fellows is doing an analysis, Olivia, of the survey results that we had from those partners, and she's preparing a report to share with them. I'd like to thank you for sharing the Brightline Stationary Study Survey. This is what we heard that might be relevant to you. So we are parsing out information from some of those neighboring counties who did share the survey so that they can see maybe for them some of those next steps.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm about to ask, because you have the 11, close to 12,000 responses. I want to see the breakdown of how many that came from Pinellas County, although we know.
And we have that on our website in the survey result document.
Yeah, roughly 80% of people were from the Tampa Bay region. So within that 80%, it breaks down.
Yeah, Pasco, and we heard from Sarasota, Manatee.
Okay.
That's on the list.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that a little different way, than what Jay said. So right now, after the board approves the study, they could go ahead and implement some of these or program some of these improvements regardless of what happens. But otherwise, it's kind of we're waiting to hear what Brightline decides to do. And then next steps are just go from there.
Because the TPO doesn't own or operate any of the facilities and the roadways or those networks, we wouldn't be responsible necessarily for shepherding some of the projects through the next steps, but we would be supporting our partners, like if HART or the city of Tampa or any of the other partners want to take things forward. And if there was a planning study, we could continue that effort, like do a phase 2, maybe the station was announced to refine these a little bit more. And we'd be happy to support if our partners want to keep this moving, but since we don't own or operate a lot of those networks, we would be more to support more than anything.
I know you said that, sorry.
I have a question. And this may be a little premature and maybe not the full intent of the study, but we know if it's even feasible for Brightline to get into that area that you sort of identified.
So the corridor itself is roughly 4,500 feet long, linear feet, and a Brightline platform needs to be roughly 1,000 feet long straight. So there are definitely opportunities in there in a couple different locations where you could put the platform.
If you get through, can they get through all the development and get to that area even?
That's the good question, is how does it get out of the median of I-4 and over? And I've been staring at like different locations. I think it's possible. I'm not an engineer, but I don't think that this would be on the discussion if Brightline didn't have a plan for that. But
Okay.
definitely within the corridor that we identified, a platform can fit along the station site and the number of vehicles that the number of train cars that they would have.
getting the original station location from 10, 15 years ago was next to Marion. It's now City of Tampa paved parking lot, and that was where it was gonna be.
The jail, the old jail.
Yeah, but yeah, it was, yeah, yeah, way back. Yeah.
Something I've learned about engineering is that it's not a problem of physics, it's about money.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
With enough money, you can make it happen.
Because if, I mean, honestly, if FDOT wanted to, they could just corkscrew the interchange and you could get it right in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If money is no object, they'll get the train.
Yeah. Money's always. Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, can we have a motion?
Yeah, this is Jay Collins, and I'll make a recommendation. I'll recommend that the TPO board accept the Brightline Station area study.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Jay, second from Sierra, any other discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, James, Stephanie. Next, Elizabeth is going to speak about tip amendments and I-4 express lanes from I-75 to county line.
Thank you, TAC, Elizabeth Watkins. So we
Lazy
come on.
compared to everyone else. I am at work. You guys are all pumping iron. And
Gina, you got a hot mic.
Well, while we're talking about I-4, the desire for Brightline, this tip amendment deals directly with some of that corridor. So this tip amendment for you today is to advance one of the FDOT projects of adding express lanes from I-75 all the way to County Line Road. So what this project is envisioning is having one express lane in each direction. And you may have heard in the news that this project is being advanced nearly a decade or more ahead of schedule to being built or start construction in 2028. It's part of Governor DeSantis' Moving Florida Forward project, where they're moving funds from the general revenue to support these high need projects. If you've been on the I-4 corridor, near Disney or near US 27, you may have heard about their initiative to add a lane. I think it was a mile or two within like a year, like something unheard of. So there's been a lot of success within DOT with rapidly advancing some of these projects that were scheduled to be delivered, again, decades into the future. We have just a bit of data shared from DOT, just documenting what some of the AADTs are and the current level of service. So currently, the level of service on I-4 is level service D. Is spoiler, it's only projected to get worse moving into the future to 2024 if we do nothing. So that's what this is showing at nearly every intersection along I-4 between the limits. It's at a level of service D, and just the demand and the trips will nearly double in some section between now and 2045. This was projected by the model. So here's the visual of what this will look like when it is complete. So again, it will be adding one express lane in each direction in the median, so not on the outside of the facility. And having those tolled along I-4, from 75 to the full county line. So currently DOT is working through preliminary engineering, updating some of the environmental analysis, but they have a scheduled letting for fiscal year 2028. And one of the ways that they're able to meet this very aggressive timeframe is using the modified phase design build. That construction cost estimate is nearly $500 million and is building on past PD&E and NEPA work that was completed back in October of 2019. So what is the action before you today? As you'll recall, the Transportation Improvement Program houses all projects that are federally funded within Hillsborough County. So because this project is being accelerated and work is going to begin soon, it needs to be added into the project. So what you see here on the screen of what's being proposed to be programmed in the TIP is about $3.7 million, a combination of federal and state funds to get that PE, preliminary engineering going. So the action before you today is to recommend that the TPO board approve this amendment to the TIP. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for any questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So you said PE is the next step. Is that what happens after PD&E before the sign? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So they're going to have to refresh the PD&E and the NEPA document and then continue to work through preliminary engineering.
Okay, yeah. And then is like design and construction funded, like after that?
So PE is essentially design. And then construction is that $500 million. You didn't see it on the tip page, but that will likely be added in another update next year. So yeah, all steam ahead for 2028 to start that construction process.
So, okay, so this, what they're proposing right now is the TIP amendment is for updating the PD&D, which was done in 2019.
Part of that, and then also going through a certain percentage of plans, maybe 60% plans, but working through that over the next few months.
Because, as they said, it is going to be a modified design fail, means usually they do the 100% designs.
And just like you said, with that implementation strategy, there's more flexibility for that contractor to change the designs as they'll also be doing construction. So.
The other question I have is, I know with the Brightline study, which we talked about, I know originally the proposal is to go through in the median, if I remember, about like 4.
So I know DOT will continue to coordinate with all partners, but it's my understanding that even after the express lanes will be built, there will still be enough space for Brightline to come through.
Okay, my communication, because we're doing studies right now on expansion of the urban service boundary in this area. And they mentioned to us, the only impact to that would be during construction of those lanes, the transit envelope would be unavailable because they'll have construction equipment in the transit envelope. So basically you have to have these lanes built prior to them being able to put train track out the middle of it.
Well, they're starting in 28, that'll be before, turning most likely.
Right.
Any other questions? I'll make one statement, kind of going back to last month's discussion. And all the projects that were moving out and we asked this question, is there other projects that are coming in that are, it sounds like this might be one of them, like priorities have changed, so. I'm not necessarily opposed to this, I'm not voting against, but I think the point we made last month, I think was a very fair point. And sort of, I want to say DOT's not being transparent because I don't think that's the case. There's implications, stuff like this, and it's a good project. I'll leave it at that.
So it's the same thing, Wes, I'm bringing up. What is the impact of this moving forward on other projects which are already?
Right. And last month we saw a number of them that were sort of moving out. Okay. Any other discussion or questions? Frank, can we have a motion?
John Scott, motion to approve.
John, second. Patrick, all right, motion by Jonathan and the second by Patrick. Any other discussion? And then all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And I've got the next one.
TPO project prioritization process. Thank you.
Casey, I'm here today to present to you, well, really not present, seek your input on some of the things that we're thinking about internally on how the TPO prioritizes projects. You may recall when we were talking about the TPO's project priority list last summer, there was some feedback from this committee as well as others in the boards for a desire to at least look around to see if there were alternatives to the sort of categorical ranking that we do here at the TPO, with added objectives to provide more information and clarity along project readiness, and then have a stronger connection between our long-range transportation plan and then our priority list, which actually helps move projects from study to implementation. So we have some consultant support that's a very quick turnaround to put together some potential recommendations in the short term on how we prioritize projects. So up to this point, we've met with all of our individual local governments in HART to get their input on how the prioritization process is working from them. We chatted with some MPOs in Florida and also outside of the state to learn about how they do things. But we're here to all the committees to kind of get your feedback. And unfortunately, just given the cyclical nature of this, we're going to seek your feedback today, go to the board in January to seek their action, and then use that immediately in the upcoming project prioritization. We're also keeping an eye on like long-term recommendations, but we feel like there are some improvements we can do in the near term. That's what we're really focused on today. So just a couple things that I need to equip you with to really, for this conversation. One, the TPO prioritizes some transportation projects with a relatively small pot of funding. So in transportation in Hillsborough County, it's about $1 billion per year. The TPO prioritizes about $25 million of that. So it's like less than a percentage point, but it's still something, right? $25 million is nothing to like turn your nose up. These projects are always identified by our local governments, our operators. And that's really important because they're the ones that are owning, operating, and maintaining those facilities. So they have to be bought in and ready to develop that project and implement it. And then the last thing is, not all funds are created equal. Local funds are much, much more flexible than federal. There are a lot of rules and requirements that go along with federalizing a project. You have to do extra administrative costs, extra review. Some things I've heard anecdotally over my career is sometimes it will even double the cost of a project. That's just not worth it sometimes. So you would want to use federal funds to fill potholes or, maybe add like 1/4 of a mile of sidewalk. You're not getting your bang for your buck, those sorts of things. I won't get into the details, but if anybody's interested, we can take a deep dive on funding. But again, it's about $25 million per year that the TPO board helps direct the risk priority list. This is an important slide. I know it's a lot of colors, looks like a periodic table. But what I'm trying to convey to you is that this is a diagram of the TPO priority list that was just adopted this past year. So each of the boxes corresponds to a project. So you see 72 boxes. That means there are currently 72 boxes on our priority list. The colors correspond to the TPO's investment programs. So based on the last long range plan, projects 2 through 9 are purple. So that means those are smart cities projects, technology improvements, those sorts of things. So we've had this policy decision that all of those projects go straight to the top, right? They are going to be our top priority because they help address congestion. Followed by the ones in red, which are state of good repair, followed by safety. The other thing that's important for you to know to kind of digest this is the ones that are bolded with that bright color means it was actually funded in the next work program. So you'll see there's really only about 7-10 boxes on here of all 72 projects. So there are a lot of projects on here that are either in development or still need some more planning. I'll leave it at that, but this is trying to help you understand kind of the results of how we've been prioritizing projects, and maybe we'll give you some ideas on some of the explicit questions that I have for you. So, we've been talking with partners, doing some soul searching on this, and what really works well for our current process is that it's very flexible. We all know priorities change sometimes, and our current structure gives our partners, the TPO committees and its board, the flexibility to change projects to have more wiggle room as we're identifying and then developing projects. One strength that's actually kind of a rare thing that happens is here at the Hillsborough TPO, we only have one list of projects. Many MPOs across the board have multiple lists. So they might have to your point, Mike, a SIS list, a biped list, a freight list. Here at the TPO, we have one list, and I know DOT really appreciates that because it's very clear. We only have one top priority and there's no extra complications to that. Some cons is sometimes it can be confusing, the outcomes. So I think that our top priority project right now is replacing signals on Ashley Drive. And, that's fine, that's it. But I think when you say this is our top priority, like those projects really should be ready to go, should be actively moving through the process. So that's something that I found to be a little bit confusing, that maybe our priorities aren't really reflecting the projects that are ready to go or maybe being closely aligned with our studies. Also, that categorical ranking that we do, right? Like smart cities first, then good repair, then vision zero. That may be prompting rewarding applications for being a little bit vague on project scopes and maybe penalizing those projects that have multiple components. So say there's a context sensitive design where they're gonna resurface the road, add sidewalks, and then upgrade a signal. That project is really difficult to put in a nice, pretty box, right? Because it has a lot of different components. And currently, the way that we're actually scoring these projects is more based on the existing condition rather than those desired impacts or anticipated outcomes of it. So the way we prioritize our safety projects is whichever projects are on a corridor that has the highest serious injuries and fatalities, those go to the top. So it's less about the project and more about the existing condition, if that makes sense. So we heard a couple themes in chatting with our partners and doing research. The first is on just the overall annual development process. And the whole idea of really taking into consideration project readiness bubbled to the top. So currently we have 72 projects, and some of those are on the list to compete for the $25 million or just to show support for a project. Say Hillsborough County is going after a discretionary grant that they would like to point to, saying, hey, this has already been prioritized by the TPO. Look, it's on their list. Kind of beef up their grant application. Also, a reason a project wouldn't be funded in a certain year is if it's actively working through project development. So say it's still making its way through preliminary engineering, that project may be skipped over if they're not ready for right-of-way or construction. So one opportunity that we're contemplating is maybe providing more information on each of those 72 projects to give a real sense to the public, committees, and board on why they were skipped, what their current status is, just to have more transparency in the process. So this is just an example of why a project might be skipped. If it was ranked number 1 and it was ready to go to right away, then DOT would know, okay, this is our first priority, it's ready to go. The same project B, again, is still in preliminary engineering, they would move down the list until they hit the project that was ready to have those funds programmed to it. Another theme that came about was on the methodology. Like you saw in that periodic color chart, is we have one single priority list by those 5 LRTP programs. Projects are really only ranked or compared against each other. So all the smart cities are compared against smart cities. All the Vision Zero safety projects are compared against each other. And some things that we heard from partners are that, projects are only ranked within that program, even if they address multiple of those priorities. So one thing that we could consider is maybe if there was a universal scoring criteria for all the projects, so that all of them would sort of be compared against one set of criteria, so that we were getting those outcomes of those scope elements that we really wanted to see. And one example of this is from MetroPlan, just over in Orlando. They have a prioritization process where all projects, whether they are, small scale, like pet improvements or big widenings, they all are evaluated against these 5 criteria. And there are different weights within each of the project types. And then on the other hand, they have something called a modal allocation policy. So they kind of get it at from 2 levels. All the same criteria, but then they have set aside allocations for each project. So 32% of that $25 million would go to multimodal improvements and complete streets. 30% would go to transit. So this way, something like this really helps projects that aren't smart cities or good repair help compete better for projects, because typically funds are run out after like priority 14. And then finally, I think with any organization, communication is something that we can look to the future of doing a better job with by providing annual guidance for applicants, kind of demystifying this complicated process. There's a lot of folks involved, local agencies, TPO and DOT. So we're committed, TPO staff, for developing some materials to bring people on board who may not have been a part of the process in the past. So I have a few specific questions I would love your feedback on. The first is, should we be considering project readiness in our evaluation criteria? What do you think about the idea of kind of that universal scoring criteria to evaluate projects? Do you have thoughts about if there should be multiple priority lists, whether it's by the actual funding program, or maybe by a project type? And then the last question is about distinguishing between symbolic prioritization versus TPO funding request. I didn't talk too much about that, so let me just give you one more piece of information. There are 72 projects. Sometimes when you have a lot of priorities, nothing is a priority. So would there be value to kind of segmenting the list to say, all right, these are the projects that are actually competing, and here's another set of projects that we all find important, but they're not being ranked against each other in order of priority. So that it's a little bit clearer to the public, the board and committees. Here's what's competing funding, and then like, here's a group of projects that are also important, but not actively seeking that 25 million. So I knew I threw a lot at you. I would love your thoughts to these questions or anything that I can help clarify.
Okay. Do you want to kind of take these one by one, or how do you want to?
Yeah.
So like project readiness would be the first one, should be an evaluation criteria. So is there any thoughts or?
How do you define project readiness? But
So how I would define that is something that is ready to start preliminary engineering.
Okay.
That is actively being developed. So out of the planning study phase, ready to be designed.
What year are they programming these? How far out?
that was my next.
Fine.
My next question.
So that's the point that I should have touched on the federalization. That's another tricky thing. So this list is used to typically fund projects 5 years out. So one thing that the city of Tampa does very effectively is they'll often submit projects only for construction funding. They'll have some planning done, so that tells us that it's ready. And then they'll do like design and right of way in-house, so that when construction's ready in 5 years, they're ready to go.
How would you? So you would say the city in Tampa again, if they have a plan, to fund design and right away, that then you would say, okay, it's construction ready. Or it will be when they're asking for the fund, is that?
That, or there's already been like a study done. Like the Plant City Trail Study. Like if Plant City came to us and said, hey, you did this study for us TPO, now we're ready to start design. That would show, I think that would be a good measure of project readiness, because there's been at least some initial screening, there's been some public outreach, something.
And it's construction in 5 years, not design in 5.
It could be designed in 5 years.
But they could start design immediately. But we're programming,
Their own.
so they could start design, right? Okay.
And that would be the discretion of the local agency.
So let's flip the question. What's the negative connotation to using that?
It would reduce the list dramatically.
You need programming projects that are only ready, and it allows, I would think it would allow more room for the projects that should be at the top of the list, rather than programming projects that aren't ready to go.
Well, I guess unless you're asking, you need 5 years.
Right.
So example, on the same lines, numbers question, asking, out of the 72 projects which we all have on list, if we use the project readiness information, how many of those 72 will be reduced?
So truthfully, this would probably go to half. Many of those projects, particularly on our major projects, this doesn't really help you if I tell you what they are. Probably many of the major projects would fall off. You know, if they don't have a PAC or maybe a hard arterial BRT in the streetcar extension, that would probably be it for our major projects, because those are the ones that doing the PDEs are very expensive, right? Doing those studies are typically, so that would probably.
Isn't that then the problem? Because if it's, a trail head. Okay, that's still money, but it's not a lot of money, as opposed to stationary planning.
Maybe it kind of depends. This is, you know, it's a criteria of many criteria, right? So is this your first go, no-go decision? Is it ready or not? Or is this one of many criteria where there could be, the rest of the criteria could outweigh that one? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that maybe it depends on how you're using the criteria and how you're defining, how it's defined.
That's a really great point, and definitely something that doesn't have to be a hard stop, you know, it could still be considered. But right now, we're not really using that as an evaluation criteria except for our safety projects. And in our current practice, those just go to the top. So projects that aren't project ready could still get on the list. I guess what I'm seeking from you today is, do you think we should be considering project readiness in this list? Like, would you prefer to see those projects to the top or maybe to the side? If they're not ready and not actively seeking funding.
I personally think we should consider it. I also think, at least speaking for Hillsborough County, our priorities often change when elected officials change. I don't know what you do about that, but and maybe that would help. This project is funded and should go.
On the same lines as Mike said, the other thing is 25 million we are comparing this between City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and city.
Very short.
Towns. Then, yeah, the hard. So you have the 5 or 6 competing agencies. But if we're going to use project readiness along with the other criteria, because we put overall out of the 72 combined came from all the 5, 6 agencies, competing versus 25. But if we use the project readiness also along with other criteria, with the weighting prioritization, then that will, example, project readiness is 50% of the 100. Wait, Then the depending on the project size. Because if we are competing for, I'm just giving an example, if you want to use the lithium ion phosphor roadway, 100 million project. But yes, we are not ready, but we are doing the preliminary work. The construction may be 6 years out. We want to apply for the construction dollars there. But that, we cannot, I mean, the 25 million is not only for the one category, they want to divvy up for different categories again. So the maximum we may about $10-12 million. But if we need 100 million, is it going to be really worth it for federalizing?
Yeah, and it's a big commitment to federalize, as you said earlier.
So what I think is weighted criteria between the different rankings. Especially the project readiness is going to be the top, I would say.
I go off script and ask you the question I'll put on this list as people who have developed and delivered projects. Like, what do you think that sweet spot is for a project that's worth it to federalize? But will compete well, right? Where it's not $100 million, maybe the total project cost was 20 million, so it's still worth the headache. Like, what are some of those projects that would work for you as local agencies who deliver these kinds of projects?
Are you talking about like return on the investment, using the money in the, where,
Just, what would you, like, if you had $100,000 project, you're gonna say, not worth it to federalize it.
right?
And what, I think she's saying, it's like $100 million project, probably worth it, right?
Yeah.
But is it 5 million, is it?
At lower level.
Question. I don't know. Maybe 5 million, I don't know, just.
So that, Mike, exactly, based on my previous experience with other counties. We went between $3 to $10 million. Because if it's less than $3 million, it's not worth federalizing. If it is more than $10 million, again, the money we are competing with is not enough.
Yeah, you're only gonna give small.
Yes.
And I think this should be also a factor when you evaluate or compare between projects. If a project requires a lot of money, so it has a chance to be federalized compared to other projects. So there could be some weight given to this aspect.
How do you all feel about the concept of universal scoring criteria?
Sorry, can I
Oh,
say
please,
something
sorry.
about residents real quick? I do agree, I think it should be a criterion, but I had a question about how would it work for things like bus replacements, since those are not like ED&E projects.
So you're ready.
Yeah.
It's ready, right?
I just
They're
thought-
ready, but I don't think the transit bus replacements doesn't fall under this criteria, under this funding mechanisms. Those are entirely from a different funding sources.
I agree. I feel like transit should be, continue to kind of be evaluated separately, because right now that project is in our state of good repair.
Yeah.
Right? And only transit projects are in there, so inherently they're kind of separate. So I don't think there would be any impact to the transit projects, because you've kind of created a program rather than a project by applying every year.
Oh. For universal scoring, since I have the microwave. For universal scoring, when you first brought it up in the presentation, I was like, I'm not sure how that would work, because we're talking about wildly different things, you know, like intersection improvements, road stuff, bus stuff. But then you put the metro plan example, and I was like, okay, it seems like it works elsewhere. So I think it might be worth looking into for us.
It definitely would have to be twofold, right? Like, we would still kind of be having these policies, assuming the TPO board supports this. But be evaluating projects with those desired outcomes that are sourced from our long range plan that we heard from the community and everything. Does anybody have any strong feelings about having multiple priority lists? So for example, I spoke to BPAC a few weeks ago. In the past, I've heard that they preferred having a separate list that just prioritized by pet projects, but they came around to that. Does anybody have any problems with our current process of just one list from one to the next project?
I like that's just me.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have one. I understand the appeal of having several, like, for example, with the readiness, like, that could be you have a project ready list and a ready list and a not ready list. But then I think it makes things more complicated if you have that outside, right?
Well, and how do you allocate between the various lists to?
Yeah.
I mean, so we are giving the rating based on project readiness, if whatever, which we decide automatically, that brings the ranking top. And if you put the dollar amount as another criteria, consider or not to consider for this project farms, and that is another criteria that brings some of the projects down. So you're basically slowly identifying the
The
most feasible.
breaking it up into multiple lists is a bad idea because then you don't actually get to see the system in play. You'll actually end up, I would assume, within a couple of years, everybody will say, well, we want to vote the number one thing out of our list to another list. And it'll just pyramid, so. Yeah, I agree, just one large vote.
The other thing is, if you go back to the periodic table of prioritization. So, how about that? Yeah, so example, 1 through 8, or 1 through 8, or the
Smart cities.
smart cities. But they are not funded, right?
Yeah, we have to skip over 2 through 8 because either they weren't ready.
They were not ready, or may not be enough dollar amounts available, also something, right?
No, they weren't ready to receive funding in that 5th year. Because the way DOT, they have the pocketbooks, right? So they're going down our list from number 1
Yeah.
until the money runs out. So this is a great observation. Projects 2 through 8, we're not actively seeking it yet. They weren't ready to go.
I was really surprised to see, I really want to see what those are.
Back to the whole ready versus what someone else, the people with the checkbook, right? Say they're willing or wanting to find. Our priorities might be in the.
That is a perfect point, Patrick, to kind of that last question. So I know I heard y'all loud and clear, we like one list, but does it make sense to maybe have a symbolic prioritization? So those priorities 2 through 8, they weren't ready to compete for funding. Maybe we could put them at the bottom of the list so that they're still on there, but not communicated externally that these are our top priorities.
So
It seems like if you use project readiness, then we'll sort of naturally.
I know,
It
automatically.
doesn't mean they have to be off the list.
Right,
You just
no.
Draw.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if we incorporate the ratings for the different criteria, I don't think we need this different symbolic.
Fair.
so
Are we tracking why they weren't ready?
Yeah, we meet quarterly with our partners. So we do have a sense of that. Most of the time is they need to start planning, they need planning funds.
Okay.
Or maybe it's on priority in their own list that they submit to us, because the TPO is making that judgment call that smart cities is at the top.
Okay,
So it may be the last priority for like Temple Terrace or something like that. So they're not actively working through project development, but it's still something they want to communicate to the TPO to get on this list to keep it on the radar.
okay.
I really appreciate the feedback today. Again, this is kind of fast and furious because we're gonna have to bring something to the board in January for action shortly after. So if you go, I'll report back to you all in older new business to kind of let you know where this all fleshed out. But we're continuing to keep an eye on the short term, but also the long term. And moving into the next LRTP, I really want to use the TAC more in that development. So really appreciate your thoughts and your advocacy. And there will be more opportunities in the future to help mold this prioritization process.
Next item on the agenda is old business and new business. We need order new business by numbers. Other than Sarah.
One item.
Thanks for letting me speak to this afternoon. So you should have gotten a request of our new call for planning projects. So at their November meeting, the TPO board opened this up. We, Elizabeth sent you an email, so look for your email from Elizabeth. Or if you can use this QR code to get to the form. We are seeking your project request for planning projects. So these are projects that would be considered in our next unified planning work program, which is like in TPO's budget for what we do with our planning dollars. The UPWP goes from July 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2028. We have to start getting this now. Our request is that your planning project ideas are sent to us by Friday, December 12th at 5 p.m. Because we will take all of the planning project ideas we get. We have to provide our draft documents and start putting the PWP together. And that goes to the TPO board in March and May. So it can be submitted to FDOT for their deadline. So we need your ideas now. And the emphasis is on planning projects. So things that the TPO can help you with or can work on together with you. The Brightline Station Area Study, for example, was a planning project that we received for the last UPWP cycle. And so it's a short form that just helps us understand what your project ideas are so we can evaluate them and see where our board's priorities are and how much funding we have and staff time we have so we can help make some of these projects happen.
So you need the short form by December 12th.
By December 12th, 5 p.m.
So you have the limitation of the dollar. I know you have a certain amount of planning dollars around.
We have certain planning dollars available, and those planning dollars get spent on a couple basic categories. So first, they go for our staff
I know.
time, and also some of the things that we have to pay for. For example, we need H2B at our board meetings, or we need to have money to print certain things, or things like that, pay our attorney fees, things that have to happen. And then we have consultant dollars and little other things like travel and then our indirect rate. So I don't have the number off the top of my head right now of how much we have available, but it really also depends on what requests we get and the urgency. Are these something that could happen in the beginning of the UPWP, the end of the UPWP? How do some of our required planning projects fall into that? So for example, by the end of this UPWP cycle coming up, so by June 30th, 2028, we're already going to be starting to work on the next long-range transportation plan. So that factors into it as well as what are our required planning documents happening in the time frame.
So how much you all have available in the last 2 years?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but it is on our website in the UPWP, but it's the number changes a little bit because it depends on how much money was left from the year before, which comes back to you in different ways. We also had $500,000 in FDOT to do the regional MPO study, which is more than we would get for that kind of planning project.
Distribution funds starting July 1st.
July 1st, 2026 is when they could be available. We're really looking for your ideas. more than anything else is like, what kind of planning projects would you like to see happen? If you have an idea of how much they cost, like a magnitude, that really helps us understand. An area where we, for example, often have flexibility is we do data analysis or collection, like traffic counts. Traffic counts are a great way for us to spend some dollars, provide a lot of value for us and our partners. And there's a lot of flexibility because the more money you have, more counts you can do, or the less counts you can do. So some things are variable and some things are more about fixed.
And I know transit is very niche, but I just wanted to offer some examples that you deal with me. A couple years ago, we used it for a bus stop inventory. This past year, like 2 months ago, we used it for outreach for the COA, which you learned all about a couple of months ago. We're gonna be using it for the TDP outreach, which is coming up. We've been spitballing some ideas for this next cycle. That's why I haven't sent you anything yet, Sarah, but it's coming. Things like microtransit studies, or maybe the BRT, something related to that.
Yeah, that's a great way. We try to look at projects across some of our different TACs. And we also try to look at projects supporting a range of partners. So this year we also funded the Temple Terrace planning work that you heard about for the trail project. We also funded that Plant City Sun Trail project that you heard earlier. So we try to do projects in a range of locations as well as a range of subject areas. They're not all one mode and they're not all in one place. We try to vary it, but that means getting ideas that can help us with that.
Any other old or new business? That means we're adjourned. All right, everybody have a great holiday.
Yeah, happy hunting.
Yeah, it's probably been
Um,